A trial by fire is a test of one's ability to perform under pressure. And although you can't really just pinpoint one specific person or one specific aspect of this entire situation that we're about to discuss, I feel like that's the best way to describe what All Elite Wrestling and Tony Khan have been going through for the last, I would say, 10 to 12 months. I guess we could start it off with the so-called ex-WWE problem, where a lot of hardcore fans of professional wrestling have kind of downplayed and scolded Tony Khan for signing ex-WWE talent and booking his shows around the talent that weren't there at the beginning or the start of the company. Some people you could use to describe this or use for, examples would be Malachi Black, the former Tommy End, and Aleister Black in WWE/NXT. CM Punk, who's definitely going to be the biggest signing and probably the most talked about performer in this video, or most talked about professional wrestler. Jon Moxley, aka Dean Ambrose, and the list goes on, but those are, and you gotta include, of course, Bryan Danielson, aka Daniel Bryan. Those would probably be the best 4 examples, or the 4 best examples to explain throughout this video. And although some of those guys, or all of them, are fantastic performers, fantastic professional wrestlers, and most importantly, fantastic storytellers when it comes to the professional wrestling business, I feel like just because they have that ex-WWE stamp looming over their head, a lot of fans may not give them the credit that they deserve for what kind of work they're putting on in the ring and in storytelling aspects all around in All Elite Wrestling. You can include other examples as well, such as Adam Cole, Cesaro or Claudio Castagnoli, Chris Jericho, etc., etc. I mean, there are a lot of people or wrestlers and performers in AEW that started off in WWE. But you also have to look at AEW being a company that's only been around for about 3 years, going on 4 years exactly. And, I think that that's going to be the problem that a lot of fans have in really being able to realize this, is that WWE has been around for decades and decades. AEW has only been around for less than 5 years. Imagine if you looked at the WWF, the World Wrestling Federation, back when it only had 5 years under its belt. I think you'd have a much different perspective going on and a much different appreciation for what AEW has been able to do. And also, when you look at the ex-WWE problem, a lot of these people or performers that everybody is complaining about on the internet and sitting there typing out these long paragraphs on social media why these people are not being, used correctly, they were saying the same things when they were in WWE and saying how if they left the WWE and went to another company like AEW, that they would be used and portrayed with the correct perception that the WWE fans or fans of professional wrestling all around the world would want them to be portrayed in. They would be portrayed in the correct light, I guess is an easier way to say this, but even when they go over to AEW, they still find things to complain about. The character's not being used well. The story's not being performed to the exact liking of what these fans want. And I think that's just the hypocrisy of professional wrestling fans all around. And I am a professional wrestling fan through and through. So I don't want you to sit here and think that I'm standing here discrediting any type of professional wrestling fan, because that's not what I'm doing. But that's kind of what's going on. There's always going to be a what if, and then even when that what if occurs, it's going to be, well, what if this, and what if this, and when this, but this, and this, And I think you understand what I'm trying to say. There's never going to be a full satisfaction for professional wrestling fans, and you're never going to be able to make everybody happy. And although it does have a lot of ex-WWE talent at the top of the company, and people believe that that's the true problem, it's not. Because although they have the top former WWE talents like CM Punk, like a Jon Moxley, like a Chris Jericho, like a Bryan Danielson, they're using those to hold down the foundation of AEW while the pillars and the, I guess you could say, building blocks of the future are being built up in its presence. You have to have a solid foundation in order to build upon that foundation so that when that foundation crumbles and withers away, you can have the new generation there to hold it up and continue to create a solid professional wrestling product, which is exactly what All Elite Wrestling is. Now, I don't really want to get into the whole drama with CM Punk and Tony Khan and Colt Cabana and Hangman Adam Page, because I'm sure if you clicked on this video, you already know all about that. And I know everybody's going to sit there and say that CM Punk is a prima donna and he causes a lot of problems, and Punk shouldn't be around, and he's injury prone, and he won the title, got injured, lost it, and won the title, got injured, relinquished it. Then Jon Moxley won the interim AEW World Championship. Then he faced off against CM Punk to become the true champion. He defeated Punk, basically in a callback to his UFC career, where he just got completely squashed and nobody understood why they did that, and they sat there and scratched their head. And then CM Punk went on to face Jon Moxley at All Out, which just occurred a couple weeks ago, or a week or so ago. And now Punk is a champion again, but he's injured and had to give up the title, and he has to sit on the sidelines. Now, I know a lot of people are going to say that all these titles were given up, or Punk's title was given up due to the backstage altercation that occurred between CM Punk and Ace Steel and the members of the Elite in the Young Bucks and Kenny Omega, and that's probably has a big part to do with it, but Punk is also injured, which, again, it seems that Punk is pretty injury prone at this point, because every time he gets back in the ring, it seems that he causes an injury to himself, which is definitely, it sucks for Punk, and it sucks for the fans, because I feel like Punk could have a very memorable reign as the AEW World Champion. And I mean, when we talk about the injury problem, there have been many other people who have been injured in AEW, like, Bryan Danielson, aka Daniel Bryan, Jon Moxley, CM Punk, like we just talked about. There have been plenty of performers at the top of the card, Kenny Omega, who have been injured. And a lot of the reasons why maybe AEW was getting scolded was because a lot of their top stars and the top people that the company was going to be portrayed around kept getting injured at the most inopportune times. And I guess you can't say injury is an opportunity, but I think you know what I'm trying to say here. They always got injured just at the point when they were really starting to pick up the pace. Omega, Moxley, Punk, and Danielson are kind of the four corners of the ring in AEW. They're the things that hold the company together. And when one of them or two of them or three of them get injured, a lot of the problems seem to come to light more because you can't hide them in the background. But I think at the same time, you have to kind of be thankful that these injuries occurred, and not to be, disrespectful towards any of the performers or professional wrestlers that have been injured. But when those big injuries occur to people who are going to be the center of your company and the center of the storylines and the center of the programming for a long time, it forces the executives like Tony Khan to hit the reset button. And while they're hitting that reset button, it might not look like anything right now. But one thing is for certain with AEW, and it's that even if it takes a long time and a slow burn style of storytelling, that's what AEW is best at. It's taking things, and maybe it takes a year, 2 years, maybe it takes 10 months to get that story where you want it to be, but it's a trickle-down effect, and everything slowly but surely works its way into the order that it's supposed to be, portrayed in, and eventually gives you a beautiful crescendo at the end of the storyline. It might not be when you want it, but you eventually get it, and that's what I think AEW does extremely well. The storytelling, the long-term storytelling, is the best aspect of All Elite Wrestling as a company and as a professional wrestling company all around. But when we talk about those talents that are pushed back and because they're injured, they're out of the company, and it forces them to hit the reset button, now you can use those talents that you're building up for the future. Some examples, you can say Hook is a perfect example of the future of AEW. He's been kind of used in the undercard, lower mid-card, and hasn't really done anything really spectacular yet, but I'm telling you, guys, that it's coming. Do not worry, Hook will be portrayed exactly how we want him to be portrayed, but it's a slow burn style of effect, and you have to realize that. I mean, the ROH Pure Champion right now, Daniel Garcia, who just defeated Wheeler Yuta for the title, he's one of the best technical wrestlers in AEW, one of the best technical wrestlers on the planet, and he's in a very, promising storyline right now with the JAS, Chris Jericho and Bryan Danielson, where Bryan Danielson is telling him that he's a wrestler, but Jericho is telling him that he's a sports entertainer. But now he's the ROH Pure Champion, which on a side note, I love that title, and I love the meaning behind that title, because there's only a set amount of rope breaks, you can only win by pinfall or submission, and it kind of brings that technical aspect and that strong style of professional wrestling to light, and being able to do that on a stage like All Elite Wrestling after they acquired the Ring of Honor company, I think that does very well for those guys who are in that lower to top mid card, so they can build up towards that main event. And it also makes the undercard very interesting, so it's not just the main events that are holding the shows together. But Daniel Garcia is 100% the future. Daniel Garcia has beaten Bryan Danielson multiple times. He's probably going to have a match against Chris Jericho, and he'll probably beat him too. And he's probably going to hold that ROH Pure World Championship for a very long time. And I can't wait to see what the future holds for Daniel Garcia. But one thing we're going to know at the end of this story is that he's not a sports entertainer. He is a professional wrestler. So we got Hook. We got Daniel Garcia. We've got former members of Team Taz and Ricky Starks, who's one of the best, mic workers and one of the best people on the mic in the entire company. You have guys like Powerhouse Hobbs, who is building himself up after he just beat Ricky Starks at, All Out. I mean, those are just a few names you can describe. But I mean, if you look at Hook, you look at Daniel Garcia, you look at Powerhouse Hobbs, and you look at Ricky Starks, those guys are the future, and they're being built up right now to be the future when it comes that time. They're being built up as the future until they can become the present. It's not about now, it's about later with All Elite Wrestling, and that's something that fans have to realize. I think another one of those future stars that you have to talk about, even though he is currently a champion in AEW, is Wardlow, the current TNT champion. His story with MJF, especially after MJF just returned at All Out, I feel like that story is going to be the best storyline that AEW has ever created, and it might be one of the best storylines in professional wrestling as a whole in terms of the history of pro wrestling. You look at how MJF got squashed at Double or Nothing, and then he walked off, and we thought we were never going to see him in AEW again. Tony Khan would avoid all types of questions. MJF cut that promo, which I've probably already included in this video that you've seen.
Look at me, Tony! Look at me! I want you to fire me! You Mark! Fire me! Fire me!
And it was a huge talking point. Everybody in the professional wrestling world was talking about it. But now, I feel like we're getting those wheels put in motion for Wardlow to be at the top of the card. We may not get it until the end of 2023. We may not get it until 2024. But I'm telling you right now, those wheels are in motion. Looking at the AEW title tournament, I'm guessing that the finals of the tournament are going to be between the members of the Blackpool Combat Club. I think we're going to have Jon Moxley versus Bryan Danielson for the AEW World Championship. And I think Daniel Bryan / Bryan Danielson, I don't know why I said Daniel Bryan, I'm getting the WWE effect here. I think Bryan Danielson will come out as the new AEW World Champion. I then think Bryan Danielson will go up against MJF for that world title. And I think MJF will defeat Bryan Danielson for the world title. Now, at that point, I think, MJF is going to go on a little bit of a run with it. He might have the belt for 7, 8, 9 months. Who knows? I think at the end of that, or in the middle of that, whenever Punk can come back, he'll go up against CM Punk. He'll beat CM Punk as the world champion. Punk will try to get his title back after relinquishing it again due to injury. He'll beat Punk again, getting one over on him. And then he's going to end up eventually going up against Wardlow. And I think Wardlow will defeat MJF for the World Championship. And that is when Wardlow will be thrust into that main event scene and really be that true monster that AEW is craving right now. And that's what I think is going to happen. I think Danielson will win the World Title Tournament. He'll then go up against MJF at a certain point. MJF will beat him for the title. MJF will defend the title against a bunch of challengers, probably a Moxley, probably a rematch with Danielson, etc., etc. Eventually, Wardlow will work his way up to a title shot. Maybe he'll win a Battle Royal. He'll win the Dynamite Diamond Ring Battle Royal or something like that on an episode of Dynamite. He'll work his way up to be the number one contender after MJF holds the belt for close to a year, probably 8 or 9 months. And then Wardlow will defeat MJF and become the world champion, really putting a halt and finally putting a, signature on the end of one of the best storylines in professional wrestling history. And that's what I see. I think at the end of this whole story with Punk, MJF, Wardlow, Danielson, I think at the end of it, Wardlow will become the champion. I think that's really the end-all, be-all with this whole entire story. Now, I know they didn't expect that backstage brawl between the Elite and everything, but the Elite also relinquished their trios titles, and they're gone. They said they put out feelers to WWE. The Death Triangle now, Penta El Zero Miedo, Rey Fenix, and Pac are the trios champions, so that's great for those titles. I think those are the perfect guys to hold it, and I think they'll hold the trios titles for a while. I think we'll see many, many great matches for those belts being contested. I don't know when the Young Bucks and, Kenny Omega are going to come back to AEW. Who knows when all this entire friggin' backstage bullshit is going to be figured out. I don't know. I wish I had the answers for you, but I don't. You look at Malachi Black asking for his release recently. He just asked for his release, and we don't know if he's going to be granted the release, but I guarantee you if he's granted that release, he's going right back to WWE, and he's going to work under Triple H, because I know he has a lot of respect for Triple H, and I think he knows that Triple H knows how to handle his character. But then you got to look at the other guys like Brody King, like Buddy Matthews, aka Buddy Murphy. What does that do to the House of Black? Where do those guys go if Malachi ends up going back to WWE? You know, there's so many questions we don't have answered yet. But, I mean, I don't know. That's kind of everything that I wanted to touch on when it comes to AEW recently. Everything is kind of being put where we want to get it now. Like, it seems like we're finally getting a little bit of clarity. And after this World Champion tournament is over, after this, you know, is all said and done and everything is figured out with the Young Bucks, Omega, Hangman Adam Page, whenever everything is figured out with Punk and everything like that, now that MJF's back, I think we're slowly but surely getting the clarity that AEW needs at the current point. It might take a couple more months. Maybe it takes 2, 3, 4 more months until we really get a clear picture of where AEW is headed. But I think we all really have to look at Cody Rhodes, the American Nightmare, the flagship, former executive vice president of All Elite Wrestling, who really started up the company alongside the Elite, you know, leaving and going over to the WWE, and everybody called him a traitor. Everybody said that he was a backstabber. Everybody said that he was a pussy. He was this, he was that. But a lot of the reasons behind why he left was he said he didn't really like the directions that the company and the executives and everything was going in, and he wanted to get out before it was too late. And now you look at what things have been happening with CM Punk, with the Young Bucks, with the Elite, with the backstage fighting, with the press conferences, with Tony Khan, with people saying Tony Khan is a nightmare to work for, with Malachi Black asking for his release. I think that the American Nightmare was onto something way before anybody even had a clue. And maybe we have to commend Cody Rhodes for getting out while he still could. And who knows if AEW will continue to flourish and get stronger, or if it will all crumble to ashes. But one thing is for certain, All Elite Wrestling is definitely in a trial by fire at the current point.